Hi, this is Chris Radford from Henry's Avalanche Talk, and welcome to one of our regular Sunday evening hangouts with Henry. Although this week it's hangout with Henry and Richard. Because we've got Henry with us, so introduce Henry. I think most of you will know about Henry.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining again.
And also introduce Richard Smith from Ongosa.com, who's going to talk to us a bit later on in the call about how to find the best off-piste guides and how to make sure you get the best off-piste guides to go with you. Hi, Richard.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all, Richard. So the call will break into two parts here. We're going to kick off with a review of the current conditions and have a look at a couple of accidents that happened this week. Very unfortunate, but and just draw out a couple of lessons from those. And then we're going to look at the current conditions, look at the outlook with the quite heavy snow that's predicted for the next, at least the next week and maybe longer, and look at the changing temperatures and various other things that have been happening. And then I want to spend a bit of time with Richard, because Richard has spoken with more off-piste guides, more mountain guides, more adventure sports instructors than probably anybody else that I've certainly met. And so I thought it'd be great to get Richard onto the call and find out what he's learned about where you find them, and when you do find them, what's the best way to hire them and work with them so that you have a great day out and so that it works really well.
Yeah, we thought we'd get Richard on, Chris, just because if it was me talking about how to find a good guide, it wouldn't be all that objective, would it?
Yeah, no. Fortunately, Richard agreed that you'd go onto his website, didn't he, Henry? So.
Yes, I probably would have had issues having him come on this this hangout or this webinar if he refused to have me and Henry's Avalanche talk on his website. But there you go. We try to be as objective as possible.
And so right, so I'm going to get into the call now, and the first thing really is that when we were talking, we spoke last Sunday, and Henry told us about the kind of weather we could expect and the kind of conditions we could expect, and as a result of a lot of new snowfall arriving and sitting on a very patchy, thin, and in some cases weak snowpack, and we were particularly concerned about the snow that would fall on north and east and to some extent west, but mainly north and east and west slopes where the snowpack was rotten, and we were concerned that not only would it be possible for people to trigger slopes as a result of a single skier going onto a slope, but also that distance triggering would be possible. And in fact, Henry, that was one of the things that some of your colleagues have reported back, isn't it? I don't think.
Yeah. Well, I think Andreas, this photo is from one of his Facebook posts on Alpine Experience website. He talked about distance triggering. This was on the Tuesday, January 5th. And actually, it was you, Chris, who gave the weather forecast just based on the very technical maps that showed all of the atmospheric pressure and the lows moving in and out. And actually, I think you got the last week more accurate than the weather services. You were saying that in it the weather would come in and out, and there'd be some sunny bits with some snowy bits, and not crazy wind that we've had in the past. And that was pretty very accurate, I thought. And but yes, yeah, I mean, I said that it was going to be coming down on that really weak layer that was that has been gathering for about a month, and although somewhat patchy, it has been in lots and lots of places, especially in north, east, and west-facing slopes, to a certain extent on the south-facing slopes. But one of the reasons why I wasn't really emphasizing the south-facing slopes is because through melting and freezing, there was a nice crust layer above the weak layer to protect it. And
we're going to have I'm going to have a quick look at that when we look at what the bulletin says.
Okay.
And we can expect some differences and some similarities, but what we are going to get, you're going to get again some days of snowfall and blizzards, a lot more wind, but in between there'll be some moments of glory or moments of risk, depending on your skill and perspective.
And colder temperatures coming up starting on Tuesday morning, I think, too.
I believe that's right. Yeah. So I mean, so what happened? This was Tuesday morning, and you can see there a group having a good time. Some excellent client management going on here with one at a time. It's a good one at a time shot, Henry, isn't it? And,
yeah.
Of skiers coming down, keeping the tracks close together. The other members of the group waiting at the top there, and
good off-piste etiquette.
Sorry, go on, Henry.
I was just going to say very good off-piste etiquette, keeping the risk down to a minimum. But, you know, this is a slope that's not even 30 degrees, so it wouldn't avalanche anyway. I mean, they could all be on there, but I think they're just allowing everybody to milk up the fun and sensation of every turn.
And but then, there's some other things that have been happening, and this picture taken by Chris Suiak of Alpine Experience, which is a picture which shows, and we put this in because it shows quite a significant avalanche. Nobody was hurt in this avalanche. A significant avalanche. We're pretty confident it was triggered by skiers, because it's hard to see why the Peace Patrol would have done this.
Yeah, and I don't believe that went naturally either. I think one of those skiers that went by it probably either triggered it by a distance, or someone maybe looked over and said, well, maybe I shouldn't ski on a steep slope above a terrain trap.
But this looks to me like, I mean, I don't know whether we don't know exactly what happened, but you've got a track here of people who stayed on the low angle.
Yeah, low angle meaning below 30 degrees. I mean, still looks steep enough to have a good time, right? So it's probably about 25 degrees as opposed to where it released, which was at about 35 degrees. But go ahead, sorry to interrupt you.
And then this distance triggering from above, so being even and staying away from the convexity at the top kept these skiers safe, even though they probably triggered this release. But look how close this is to the piste, which is just here, and this goes to a message that my daughter Lizzie was on a university trip recently, and again was sharing stories with people who kept saying, oh, I don't go off piste, I only go on the sides and near the piste and that kind of thing. And she was patiently trying to explain to them that that's just the same.
And as they said in their latest Ski and Telegraph, that the Telegraph Ski and Snowboard section of the Telegraph. I think they mentioned, as I mention all the time, that slopes that are steep slopes that are next to the piste behave the same according to the same rules as steep slopes far away from the piste, and that's especially true right now. Because of these slopes have not had any skier compaction on that weak layer before. So there's been no one really skiing on these slopes to compact them before the new snow came in. And that's one of the reasons why. And all of these slopes near the piste and the classic off-piste runs are so much more unstable than they usually are by this time of year.
And here we have here we have a situation where if anybody had been in here, they would have been buried very deep as a result of the amount of snow that piles up at the bottom. And I
just point out also that that a lot of accidents do happen right next to the piste because people have a false sense of security, and most accidents, will repeat it for those of you who don't know, 95% of all avalanche accidents are triggered by the victim or someone else in the victim's group. And about 90% of the time, or even more, it's a slab avalanche that's involved. A slab avalanche looks exactly like this. It has a fracture at the top, and it's a cohesive layer of snow. It could be powdery, but it's a cohesive layer of snow that slides on a weaker layer underneath it. And one thing, contrary to popular belief, it's not these huge avalanches that kill most people. It's the small to medium-sized avalanches like this one right here.
And I guess that's the kind of leads us in to look at the unfortunate incident just on the side of the fast that happened on Tuesday as a result of some I don't know whether it was 2 or 3 skiers.
I think it was 3 people. But many ways, the result of exactly what we talked about in our last week's webinar, and we just were talking about is the new snow and the weak layer, and avalanches are triggered by weight, and the extra weight triggered the avalanche, and the people were taken down on it. And those are slopes obviously steeper than 30 degrees. I think probably about 35 degrees or more where they actually released up in the shade there by the rocks. And very, very, very sad.
And interestingly, some friends of yours, I believe, Henry, were skiing over here on the on what is the left-hand side of our photo.
Yeah, we call the lookers left rather than the skiers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our lookers left.
And by being
another route,
more careful about their slope selection, didn't have this problem. But another comment that you made to me about this, Henry, was that one of the things that could have, if you like, deceived people was the fact there were a lot of slopes like this that people skied on and tracked, and they didn't go.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. I think that the number one challenge, or one of the very most difficult challenges that I have felt that I'm up against over the last 25 years in avalanche education, and especially just increasing awareness, is that 97 to 98% of the time, a slope that's unstable and that should avalanche will not avalanche. So yes, there were hundreds of tracks on dozens and dozens of slopes that were similar to this one right here on Tuesday. And I'll repeat that again. There were just hundreds of tracks on dozens of similar slopes to this on Tuesday, and they did not avalanche. So that's why intuition is not the best guide when it comes to avalanche safety, because you think, logically and intuitively that makes sense. If the other ones didn't avalanche, these ones shouldn't either. But there are certain facts that led to instability on all of these slopes. And that's what we've all been talking about over the last few weeks about the instability that's going to result once the snow does come on these steeper slopes. And unfortunately, that's the way it works. It could go on the first time you go on it. It could go on the 100th or 200th time you go onto a slope like that's unstable. But every time you do go onto a steep slope with very unstable conditions, especially right after it snows, you're taking a very big risk.
And this crown, I believe, from the Piste Patrol report, was about 60 centimeters at the top there. Yeah.
I think they said on average that yeah. But in some places you can tell it doesn't look all that deep.
But the severity of the incident was magnified by this terrain trap down here, Henry. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, a terrain trap could be cliffs. And generally in the Alps, the things we're up against are cliffs and narrow valley bottoms. And a terrain trap is something that exacerbates or makes the avalanche much, much worse than it could be. I mean, this does not look like a mean, nasty thing that it is. But what's at the bottom of it makes it even worse. There's kind of a trough, a little narrow valley bottom. Even if it just gets flat for quite a ways underneath the steep slope, it makes an area where people can be buried under quite a bit of snow, and it even doesn't take that much snow to bury you so that you can't move. And if you're under 30 centimeters or so of snow, or even 20, you can't really move, and then you only have about 15 minutes of air basically to breathe around your mouth, and that's why it happened so quickly. I think also why that people slipping into a coma after they've been buried happen so quickly. There's also some rocks and things here that might have complicated trauma-wise, but I'm not so sure if I haven't heard that was the issue with the victim.
So this picture's from Benoit at Radio Val d'Isère,
yeah, we should have maybe mentioned that before. Thank you to Benoit. And this one here too, I think.
And this one here, which is in the Santon.
From Radio Val d'Isère.
So here we have a slope that is south-southeast facing, and we've got some tracks coming in here, and looking at the tracks here, the skiers came in quite low down and caused a trigger that broke right up here.
Yeah, it looks like maybe even 100 meters or so above. Again, we're piecing this together from information that I've gathered from the Peace Patrol and that we've gathered from various different sources. But that looks like the most likely scenario. And even if it wasn't, there's been hundreds of scenarios similar to this over the last couple of decades.
And both of these incidents, Henry, I'm looking at them. The altitude of the first one is probably in the region of 2,500, and this one looks more like about 2,300, 2,400 to me.
Oh, yeah, about that. Yeah, I would say that's right.
And these were, in some senses, classic day after fresh snowfall, week layer, excitement because there's been a massive long period of frustrating conditions, particularly for the seasonaires people, the seasonaires who have been there all the time.
Yeah,
and certainly the Radio Val report highlighted, if you like, impatience, powder frenzy as a contributing factor to these incidents.
Yeah, well, Benoit, who's the director of Radio Val d'Isère, he's been here for decades, at least 30 or 35 years or so, and he's very much in he's very much in tune with the local seasonaire community and also the tourists as well, and he really will have known that this year being one of the worst or the worst starts to the season in 3 decades or so, would be very much in tune to the fact that lots of us were very, very chomping at the bit, so to speak, and once the snow came, we were ready to race out there and leave our better judgment behind as a result.
And then after this, it carried on snowing, but then it got warm. Here's a picture of the rain.
Yep.
At an altitude.
This is a Wayne from Alpine's photo of the Rond-Point des Pistes in Val d'Isère, I think.
Yeah. And what impact, Henry, does this have, the rain?
Well, in general, it has an initially, well, it makes the snow crap, not very nice to ski in, generally. But in terms of stability, the initial effect is a lot of instability, but the net effect is significant stabilizing of the snow, especially as temperatures go down. So stabilizing of the snow because it helps to compact the snow, it helps to purge it, and then if these temperatures go down, as they're going to do on Tuesday, it helps to reduce the instability or increase the stability. And even already before it started to get cold, if you look at the avalanche forecast, I know we're going to look at that in a minute, the main reason why the danger rating of 3, there's a danger rating of 3 below 2,003 or 400 meters. It's because thanks to the rain that went up to about 2,500 meters on a couple of occasions, but really saturated the snowpack enough below 2,002, 2,300 meters, enough so that it stabilized and went through the effects that I just mentioned.
So just to the point, I think it's possibly Richard rather than Henry, but Richard, can you just reduce the volume slightly on your laptop, because there's a small amount of feedback coming through, and Henry as well, maybe just keep the volume as low as you can so that you can still hear, but we just don't get the feedback on the microphone.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
We will listen to our technical IT director.
And so back to the weather, and then it got colder again. But not that much colder, I guess, Henry. This is a picture of a frozen tree after the kind of rain, frozen, wet tree with wet snow on it.
Yeah, again, Wayne taking a photo of that. But yeah, it's the warming and then the freezing and warming and freezing actually helps to stabilize the snowpack. I can't believe how many people, even fairly knowledgeable people who've been here, in the mountains for a while, saying, "Oh yeah, it's really unstable because all of the cold temperatures and warming and back and forth and up and down of temperatures." No way. Anytime it gets warm and gets cold again, that's stabilizing the snowpack. The thing that makes the snowpack very cold, very unstable, is cold temperatures and a thin snowpack like we had at the beginning of December. That's what makes it inherently unstable, and then afterwards, warming will will have have a destabilizing effect initially, but but the net effect of warming is stabilization after it settles down and it gets colder.
And then since then, it's just kind of snowed above what kind of altitude, Henry?
Well, above sort of, it's been going up and down so much, but the good snow has been up above about 2,400 meters. And I'll just add in, I was just talking to my colleague Wayne, who's done about 35 seasons in the Espeskili, and I couldn't understand why Friday it was so bad. Because Friday, when the rain came in, it was and the warm temperatures, the skiing, the actual quality of skiing was terrible, even above 2,500 meters. And then for some reason, yesterday, Saturday, and Sunday, the quality of snow above 2,500 meters just got much better. And Wayne said that he has absolutely no idea. I don't know why either, but that's the case. And I'm saying all that just to emphasize that it's really important. If you want to get some good skiing in, you've got to always go out and get up and get into it and see for yourself, because sometimes what the quality of snow is defies any sort of logic or theory. And
So,
this proves it here. These guys are having a great time in that last photo.
yeah. And, so if we look at the advice from Météo France published this afternoon, they're talking about risk 4 above 2,200 and risk 3 below that. They're talking about instability everywhere, every day, all the time, toujours instant. And they're talking about numerous plaques, especially at altitude. There are some spontaneous releases.
Plaques being the French word for slabs.
Yeah, sorry, just slabs, yeah.
Avalanches.
Yeah. And we're talking, they talk about the fact that the alternating between the rain and the snow has created some stability below 2,200.
Yeah.
They're expecting consistent bad weather, but above 2,000 or even 2,200, the snow remains dry. But it's been windy, the snow's moving around. They still think there might be up to another metre of snow coming down in the next few days, which is a lot. So that will result in the risk staying at the 4 in the high altitude areas at a minimum, I guess, Henry.
Yeah, as a minimum. I wouldn't. If we do get a meter in the next couple of days, we might get a spike up into a 5 at some point, especially as the winds pick up and transport. That meter can easily be 2 meters in different areas or more because of the snow that's already lying up there above where we got any rain or anything. So I'm looking at that forecast probably going up in the next couple days to 4 and maybe even into the 5 area.
So would it be fair to say, Henry, yet again, we'll find the best skiing in the highest risk, higher up?
Yes. Oh yeah, because the snow down below I think no. Once it starts getting colder on Tuesday.
Okay.
The snow that comes, the snow, it'll be lighter snow, but on a more stable base. So it'll make sense. What I'll be aiming for is maybe once it starts getting cold and there's nice dry snow down lower, I'll be trying to go for the literal low-hanging fruit down a little bit lower and down where it's a little bit more stable. But for now, anyway, yes, the best snow has been up high and is right now up high above that mark of where it turns into a danger rating of 4.
But on the weather, I don't think you're going to see any sun till Wednesday, and even then, maybe Thursday. Next weekend is probably a bit quieter, but then it comes back again the week after.
Yeah, yeah.
So and by then, I think more consistently colder from the north, and potentially quite intense again. So it's going to be really hard to make any general predictions about whether anywhere is going to be particularly safe.
Yeah, I think so. Other than if it gets nice and cold, down below the rain snow limit, and
Okay.
Meteo France basically said the exact same thing as I was saying in the avalanche forecast, is that the melting and freezing has had a stabilizing effect. At the point at which there was enough saturation, they're saying 2002, I'd say 2002, 2,300 meters and downwards. But I will very, very briefly just say that the danger rating of 4 is I think is and the high danger ratings are going to be much more of an issue when the sun comes out, perhaps on Wednesday or so.
Hmm.
And I think one of the themes that we're not going to touch on all that much tonight was is it safe to go on a danger rating of 4 off piste. I'll just say very simply, yes, it's fine as long as you stay away from all slopes that are 30 degrees or more. So that's the steepness of a steep red run steepness to black run steepness, and not only where you're skiing, like where your feet are and below you, but also above you now. So if you can stay in areas where there's no slopes that are steeper than 30 degrees above you, around you, or below you, then it's perfectly fine. And if you're very experienced, then you can play around on some of the slopes that are a bit steeper, but for me, I'd be like not much more than 30 meters or 40 meters or so, because
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff's just ready to come down.
Yeah.
If it hasn't already.
So, thank you very much, Henry. Now, if anybody's got any questions, we'll pick them up at the end. You can put them in you can click on the Q&A button on the Hangout, and we'll pick them up, or you can just put them on the comments box in the Google Plus page, and we will pick those up at the end of the call. And answer any questions anybody's got about the conditions or anything else you want to ask Henry or Richard. So, Richard, when we spoke and when we first met, I really liked your story about how you got Ongosa going, and I think it kind of gives us an idea of what it's all about and what finding good guides is all about. Do you want to talk about this photo and your story?
Yeah, cheers. So I did. I've been skiing since I was 3, and like any young aspirational skier, ended up doing ski seasons, not as an instructor or anything, but just worked in around the resort, and then eventually decided to get a proper job in London, like many ex-seasonaires, and found myself then skiing all over the place in Japan and Canada and America, New Zealand, all sorts of places, and it was funny in that when I worked in a bar, I knew a lot of guides and instructors who could show me around the area, but when I started traveling other places, I found that I would literally not know where to go, and so started to use guides and found that good ones weren't that easy to find. So got to a point where I thought, well, actually, this is a real challenge for me, and I believe there's plenty of other people out there, not just in skiing and snowboarding and alpine sports, but other sports. So subsequently decided to launch Ongosa. Ongosa is Swahili for to guide or to lead, and really try and bring together a community of quite often independent or very small companies of adventure sports instructors and guides into one place, so they can be easily found by people who are looking to gain those sorts of services.
One of the things I noticed when we first talked, Richard, was that the first person I've come across that is really trying to help people find what I call the individual, because I don't so much think that as clients we want to necessarily go with one ski school or one guiding company or whatever. What people tend to do is go, oh, that guy Henry, or that guy Wayne, or that guy Andy, that guy, and they talk about them, and that's where the recommendation is. It lies with the person, and trying to cut through sometimes the organisations to find that person has been quite tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've found, certainly from doing ski seasons, that the best ski instructors or the best guides quite often are independents. They work by themselves because they are, they're in demand, and and while they do have time in the season that they're looking to find new clients, they do rely on a lot of word of mouth and repeat business because that they are very good. I'm not saying that the ski school, bigger ski schools aren't. I'm just saying that it's a slightly different incentive, if you like, if you're an independent. So, yeah, and then you find that these guides or instructors, if they are kind of in it for themselves, they're very passionate about about what they do. They've got an identity. They aspire to it. Might be the way they ski or the way they teach, or and they're very passionate about making sure their clients have a good time. Which ultimately, if you are out on a holiday for a week and you've got can afford to take a guide for a day or two, those you want those 2 days or that day to be your best day. You don't want to be hanging out with somebody you don't get on with, do you? So.
Yeah. I mean, Ongosa's a place where you can locate guides, and which I know that you've done some screening on as well, and you're aware of the feedback that the guides get and so forth. But that's kind of like, I suppose that's kind of like the TripAdvisor approach. But there's something else that I wanted to ask you about, Richard, which is it's not just about I've got some money, you should want to do business with me. I think a guiding relationship is about two people who get on with each other. And how should people approach guides? What kind of questions should they ask them to find out if they're the right people for them?
Yeah, so I'd be so when we've been looking for so the community we've got on Ongosa at the moment is very much focused around the winter alpine community. We're going to build on that, but for the time being, so the guides and instructors that we've really looked for, we've wanted to vet them to make sure that they are specialists in that area. They're not just a mountain guide that does trekking and climbing and some ski touring, but they're very much focused on either skiing or snowboarding. Or alpine climbing. And then, so if you are looking for say if you want to go ski touring and you're looking for a guide to take you, say, hut to hut for a few days, or if you're looking at something maybe more a free ride, I'd want to see pictures of them with their clients doing the sort of thing that you'd want to. Might seem obvious, but if you look at a lot of these different websites and such, you'll see that they say they do anything, but actually they're very good at or very into certain things, certain disciplines. So I'd be looking for that, and when I talk to them, I'd ask them what they've been up to recently. I'd be looking to make sure that they are doing regularly the sorts of things that you want to do, because then they'll know where to go and where to find the right snow, or they'll know what's been tracked out, what to avoid, or so. There are people that say that they can, legally they will be allowed to take you and guide you off piste, but do they know? Are they going to be specialist in that, in what you want to do? And I would just check on that. And then the other thing I always believe is that, if I'm going skiing, this is it's a short period in the year that I get to go and have time for myself, and I don't particularly want to spend time with somebody that I don't necessarily have other stuff in common with. So just trying to get to know them a bit more than just you can take me guiding. And then the other thing I always find is that actually, if you do, the tendency is to get a guide for the day. He can show you around, and then you go off and do it yourself. But actually, if you do spend a couple of days with a guide, then they'll get to know you. They'll get to know what you're able to ski or snowboard, and where you'd like, and what excites you, and therefore they're prepared to sort of plan a bit more about where they can take you, and you won't have to do that kind of initial hour where they sort of take you off to the side of the piste and check out your skiing. So that you'll find that the day two is quite often they'll take you some places where that you wouldn't have expected. That's perhaps a bit more progressive, and more what you want to do.
And interestingly, you separated here ski instructors and snowboard instructors. I understand that difference. You've also separated ski instructors and mountain guides. We were talking earlier, Richard, about some interesting characteristics of mountain guides and ski instructors. We'll talk a bit about the differences.
Yeah, so a ski instructor is taught to teach, and that you get to at a certain level they can take that teaching off piste, but not all ski instructors can take you off piste, and same with snowboard. And then mountain guides, they are, as the term, it's a full mountaineering discipline. So it will include climbing, rock climbing, trekking, all the way up to glacial access, and on top of that, they're likely to be able to ski or snowboard. But saying that, in my experience, I have hired a guide to take me to do the Valley Blanche with my brother, and we watched the guy fall over a number of times. So just because he has an IFMGA mountain guide award doesn't necessarily mean he's a good skier or she.
Some of them can't ski, can they? Or not say can't ski, but just aren't skiers like ski instructors. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas they might be able to take you places that ski instructors can't, do things that ski instructors can't. They might not be as good as a ski instructor. And then with ski instructors, you've also got to consider they might be able to take you off piste, but they spend 60–70% of their season teaching people to ski bumps or to carve, and so they don't get to go off piste as often. So you've just got to get the most out of it. I think you've just got to assess what is it you're looking to get out of that day. Is it you want to learn to ski better off piste, and then therefore you might look for a very good teacher, or are you looking for somebody who's going to take you to safely to go and ski loads of fresh powder and be able to stay ahead of the sort of the pack and get to those places quickly, and not have to fight for your fresh turns and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I had somebody ask me when I was out in December about. They said they wanted an instructor to take them off piste, and I said the first question I asked them was, "Do you want to learn how to ski better off piste or find the best snow?" Because depending on your answer to the question, that might direct you to different people.
absolutely, yeah.
And because there are some people I know have a fantastic reputation for helping people discover new technique and develop their technique, and others seem to be more motivated by just the process of guiding people to the best snow and discovering, and because they're doing it every day, they have the best knowledge of where the best snow is. I think that's your experience, Henry, isn't it?
Oh yeah, very definitely. I'm listening with lots of curiosity. I'm very impressed there, Richard. Keep going.
Yeah, and there's another really good anecdote. So when we look to recruit onto Ongosa really through word of mouth and talking to them. I'd wish I could ski with everyone because that would be an awesome job, but unfortunately, so we do rely on talking to our network and getting people to recommend people and then vetting them in that process. And I came across 2 stories about the same guide who I won't name names. One of them thought this guide was the best, had the best time, did a week ski touring with him and just thought he was absolutely awesome. And then another guy I skied with who also knew him said it was the worst weekend he'd ever had on skis with this guide, and he said it was horrendous, and his wife has never ski toured since. Effectively, she spent 2 days crying, and the difference, the guide presented the same product effectively, which was ski touring, but he was very keen to push people to their absolute physical limit. And for the first guy, that was amazing because he had this amazing time. They skied all sorts of places, and he climbed higher and faster than he'd ever done before. Whereas the guy who was with his wife, they wanted something that was a bit more within her comfort zone, and to be pushed to the point of exhaustion and just feel like you can't go on. It's only lunchtime. So I mean that's sort of quite a bit of an anecdotal story, but there's subtleties within that. So if you've got a guide who's really keen to get out and push to get to the next powder field, one group of people that's going to be amazing. But for another group of people that perhaps need to stop, want to take a base layer off, want to make sure they get a picture and sort of soak it in a bit more, then they'll be very frustrated with that sort of approach because they'll never feel like they get to stop and they'll just keep going. So it is worth sort of trying to like, engage with your guide or instructor, tell them what you're after, tell them what you'd like to do, and get that dialogue going, because ultimately no one can read your mind. So it's as much important for you as a client to try and express what you're doing, what you're trying to get out of it, than the guide listening to them and trying to deliver that.
I mean, another area in that for me is tolerance for risk, because I think, you know, there's been cases of accidents where, with guides involved, where when people said, "Oh, I felt like you know," clients have sort of thought they were pushing it a bit, and I've always advocated to people. I don't know what you think about this, Richard. That having a discussion with the instructor about the risk, because I think the default reaction by an off-piste guide or mountain guide is that his job is to, or her job is to, give you a great time. And that means pushing the needle a bit, finding the best snow, and if that's not, and sometimes that means taking some risks, and I think you can have a discussion with them about it. I don't know, what's your thoughts on that, Richard?
We've talked about this a couple of times, haven't we? And I think that, I mean, from our perspective, we want to make sure that everyone that we're working with has enough experience to be able to manage a client and the client expectation, be able to explain what risks are being taken on, and those sort of things. That's what we look for. I think if you're ever with a guide or an instructor and you don't feel like you're safe, you should articulate that to that professional, and ask them what their decision making is and where they perceive the risks, or why don't they perceive the risks. I think the other thing to say is, you are putting a serious amount of you're putting your life in their hands, so to speak. So you got to be very comfortable that they're doing something because they feel it's the right thing to do, not because they're feeling pressured to do it. So again, I think it goes back to that point of having a conversation and trying to make sure that you've got a good dialogue with them. And if you don't, then you're probably with the wrong guy for the day, and you should think about finding somebody else next time.
I remember when I hired one of the hat team to Roddy to take my teenage children off piste. I remember explaining to them. I said, your first duty is to bring them back alive, and your second duty is to give them a good time, not the other way around. And Roddy's reaction was, well, I'm glad that's such a relief to know that.
Yeah.
And he actually said it had an effect on the decisions he took about which slopes to go on.
Good. Yeah.
And so I personally think everybody can have that guidance, whereas some people are happy. I mean, you've had clients, Henry, who want to push it a bit, haven't you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And others who perhaps be less comfortable with that.
Yeah. And I've had people make the same sort of statement that you did about your children when I've been with them and their children, for example. And then other people who say that they really, what they really want to do is go steep and deep. And then I've got to manage their expectations at that point too, saying, look, if we're going to do that, there's some really clear things we got to talk about in terms of risk management and following instructions, stopping at islands of safety, and not sort of, if I say 50 meters, that doesn't sort of mean 50 and then 5 meters distances between us as we're going down the slope, that kind of thing. But yes, definitely.
And that, well, everything you said, Richard, kind of implies that it's possible to have a conversation with the guide in advance of the trip. Is that always possible? And is it essential?
It's not essential. It's a very much I'd want to have it. You'd want to, you want to make sure that you know what you're doing that day, that you've packed enough things for you to be comfortable. You be it water, food, the right clothing, all those sorts of things. Obviously, equipment. I mean, my experience is that you will, if you take a guide out for the day, the first thing they'll do is they'll spend, even if it's just freshly snowed, it's all beautiful, they'll take you somewhere where they can totally manage the environment, which will be the side of a piste somewhere, and then from there they'll start to build up confidence with you as a client. So wherever possible, you want to be able to engage with them, talk to them about what you've done, where you've been, and what you're looking to do next, and that perhaps helps to encourage. It helps them realise the level that you're at and what you're trying to get out of that day. I mean, within Ongosa, you can certainly message people and engage with them beforehand to check before you book them. And I think that every guide I've spoken to is always keen to have a conversation wherever possible. I'm sure, Henry, your preference is to sort of chat about what people are up to and what they want to do. And if not, you just have to do that on the lift, don't you? The first day.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything else, Richard? That's great, Richard. Is there anything else I haven't asked you about that you think we should discuss on the subject of finding the best off-piste guides?
I suppose my top tip would be, when you're looking for these sorts of professionals, there are people who have made significant sacrifices to go and live and work in the mountains, and there is a huge variety of different approaches that people take. So I'd certainly try and find somebody who's you can get on with, that you can get an indication that they've got some shared interests, be it the summer sport or what have you. I'd also look to see what if they've moved there, for example, then you get a sense that they're very focused on living and working in the mountains. And in my experience, that often translates to them wanting to deliver a good product to their clients, because they get a buzz out of people getting a buzz out of what they're into. So those are the sorts of things I'd suggest are worth looking out for. And yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard. And
thank you.
And
thanks, Richard. That was good. That's very good.
And I'm just looking for some questions. The questions about how we join the Hangout. I'm afraid you're not. This is a Hangout on air. You can ask questions through the comments box, or by pressing on the Q&A button, and we can see those questions and address them. But we have kind of too many people on these calls to be able to open them up to a general discussion. And I'm just now going to back
to see the Q&A button. You have to drag your mouse around a little bit so it appears on some screens.
Yeah.
Because when I stop dragging it, it goes away. Whoop.
Henry, we lost.
I think we've just lost Chris. I guess. Yep. So Chris is back on here, and if anybody could ask any questions that you might have, ask questions to me, Henry, or Richard. We take a couple minutes and do some questions and answers, and I think we've found Chris, our moderator, is back with us now. And actually, it's Chris who will probably be receiving the questions, because he's moderating.
I think we don't have any, Henry. So
okay.
So we're done with this. We're done with this call. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining. And sorry about that little technical glitch at the end there. And thank you very much, Richard, for coming to share your experience. This call will be recorded and available on this page. It will also be in our YouTube channel, and we will be doing our best to do it. We're planning another call next week. The conditions will have changed, I think, quite dramatically between now and then, and we should be able to give an outlook about as and when things start to look a bit safer. And also, we have with us on the call next week is Misha from FatMap, the new mapping tool, is going to come online and talk to us about how we can get better information about which slopes have the right slope angles, how we can find routes, and how we can get some really quite technical detailed information about some of the most famous off-piste routes. So Misha will be joining us to talk about mapping and route finding, as well as Henry joining us to give us an update on conditions.
That's right, and just I've seen that there's quite a few people joining in. I want to thank everybody for joining in. We've had another large audience this week, and I'm sure you'll have questions that'll pop into your mind as time goes on over the next few days. So don't hesitate to send us an email on the contact on henrysavalanchetalk.com. And thanks very much again. Have fun and be safe.
And thank you, Richard.
Thanks very much.